The doors reopen. There it stood silent, towering, and broken by time. The Waverly Hills Sanatorium, once a place of healing, had long since become a monument of decay. The sun was sinking fast behind the trees, casting long shadows over its cracked brick walls. Ivy clung like desperate fingers across the structure, and shattered windows stared blankly out like dark eyes. No one came here anymore, not legally anyway. But tonight, 5 young explorers, thrill-seekers from the city, had other plans. "All right," whispered Mason, the leader of the group, gripping a flashlight. "This is it. Let's make history." His girlfriend Lena stood beside him, holding her phone, already recording. "Waverly Hill's the most haunted place in Kentucky," she said to the camera with a grin. "Let's see if the stories are true." Behind them, Theo, Jade, and Nick all adjusted their gear. Cameras, EMF detectors, a spirit box. Most of it bought cheap online. But it wasn't about the equipment, it was about the thrill. They found a side window already cracked open, just wide enough for someone to squeeze through. One by one, they climbed in. The air inside hit them like a wave. Cold, musty, heavy, as if the walls themselves still remembered the sick and the dying. "This place is massive," Jade murmured, turning in a slow circle. The hallway stretched ahead, the ceiling high and caved in places, the wallpaper peeling like sunburned skin. Their flashlights cut through the gloom. The first floor had been a reception area once. Now, it was filled with collapsed furniture. Old wheelchairs, rusted gurneys. Graffiti lined the walls, some crude, others strange symbols that none of them recognized. Nick walked over to an old sign still hanging crooked above a doorway. "Patient Admittance West Wing." He smirked. "Imagine how many people walked through here and never walked back out." "Don't," Lena said quickly. Her voice echoed a little too loudly. Mason checked his phone. "All right, it's 7:43 p.m. We'll stay for 2 hours, shoot everything we can, and get out. Unless the ghosts like us," Theo joked. They all laughed nervously. Deeper they went. With every step, the temperature seemed to drop. Mason's breath began to mist in the air. The hallways became narrower, the doors more decayed. Some had names still scratched into the wood: patients, perhaps, or nurses. There were sounds too, little ones, like soft taps, scratches, a faint dragging sound from far away. "I thought this place was abandoned," Jade said. "You hear that?" "Probably rats," Nick muttered, but he didn't sound convinced. They made their way to the central wing, the infamous main hall where dozens of ghost sightings had been reported. They'd read the stories: nurses walking at night, children's laughter, disembodied screams, and a tall, dark figure with no eyes. But stories were one thing. Standing here was another. It felt wrong. The group paused. A wheelchair was sitting in the middle of the hall, facing them. "Was that there before?" Theo asked. No one answered. No one had touched it. Lena lifted her camera. "This is gold," she whispered. But as she zoomed in, the wheelchair moved. Just slightly. A small, slow twist, as if something had gently pushed it. They froze. Theo's EMF reader beeped suddenly, a rapid flicker of green to orange. "Ho," he said, backing up. "That's not normal." "No wind in here," Nick muttered, stepping closer to the wall. "Hello," Mason called out, his voice trembling just enough to betray his nerves. Is anyone here?" Silence. Then a whisper, so soft it could have been imagined. Or not. Lena's camera picked it up, a voice, barely audible. "Don't go upstairs." They all turned. "What did you say?" Mason asked, looking at Lena. "I didn't say anything," she replied. Everyone's face went pale. The group stared at each other, caught in a moment of collective disbelief. "That was real, right?" Jade whispered. "We all heard that." Theo swallowed. "Yeah, and it said not to go upstairs." Naturally, that's exactly what Mason wanted to do. He checked his map. Room 502 is on the 5th floor. That's where the nurse supposedly hanged herself. Maybe we should stay down here, Lena said softly. No way, Nick replied. That's what we came for. Despite Lena's protests, the group continued. The stairwell creaked with every step. As they climbed, the building seemed to grow darker, colder. The light from their flashlights didn't reach far anymore. It was as if something swallowed the light. Halfway up, Jade stopped. Wait, listen. A faint sound. Rhythmic. Footsteps. Above them. But slow, dragging. 1, 2, pause. 1, 2, pause. As if something was waiting. Or limping. They all stood in silence. Then, the footsteps stopped, and a door slammed above them. Bang! They jumped. Lena nearly dropped her phone. Mason forced a smile. Probably just whined again, right? No one laughed this time. The 5th floor was unlike the others. There was something still about it. The air was thick. The silence was absolute. Even their footsteps sounded muffled. They turned a corner, and there it was. Room 502. The door was open just a crack, enough to see darkness beyond. Jade stayed back. I'm not going in there. Nick nudged Mason. You first, man. You're the one who wanted this. Mason took a deep breath, gripped the flashlight, and pushed the door open. It groaned. Inside was an old hospital room, rusted bed frame, broken window, and a single chair in the corner still hanging from a piece of rope tied to the pipe above. The rope had snapped long ago. Lena followed him in, filming everything. This is where she died, Mason whispered. They say she was pregnant, unmarried. When they found out, they covered it up. She couldn't take it. Suddenly, the flashlight flickered, went out. Darkness. Then Lena screamed. Light returned. The chair was swinging, wildly, back and forth. There was no wind. No one had touched it. They all ran, back down the stairs, heartbeats thundering. Theo dropped his camera, didn't even stop to pick it up. Back on the main floor, they regrouped, breathing hard, sweating despite the cold. Nope, Nick said, pacing. Nope, we're done. That was not okay. We have to leave, Lena said, still shaking. But when they got to the window they'd used to enter, it was gone. Bricked up. Just like that. What the hell? Mason slammed against the wall. This wasn't here before. Theo tried another door. Locked. Another. Jammed. Every possible exit sealed. The sanatorium wasn't letting them go. It's like it's alive, Jade whispered. Suddenly, the lights, the ones that shouldn't have worked, flickered on. A low, humming buzz filled the air. The building had woken up. Whispers in the hallway. The lights overhead buzzed faintly, weak, flickering as if the building itself was drawing a final breath. The group stood still in the lobby, panic tight in their chests. The window they'd crawled through earlier was now sealed shut by what looked like fresh bricks. Not old, dusty ones like the rest of Waverly Hills, but clean, damp mortar, still drying. This wasn't here, Mason said, voice low, flashlight shaking in his hand. Are we being messed with? Theo asked. Is someone else here? No, Jade whispered. It's this place. Lena was trembling beside Mason. Why would the lights turn on? There's no power, right? No power for decades, Nick said. That's what the tour guide said. Then it happened. A sound. Whispers. Soft, lingering. Floating through the hallway behind them like a cold breeze. They turned slowly. Nobody was there. But the whispers continued, impossible to place. They weren't coming from a single direction. They were everywhere, surrounding them. Lena pressed herself against the wall, breathing hard. I can't do this. Mason tried to pull her in. It's okay. Just stay close. But the whispers grew louder, as if something was gathering courage. Words began to form from the gibberish. Partial sentences, a child's voice, then a woman's, then several overlapping tones. They never left. Help me. Cold, it's so cold. Why are you here? Nick raised his flashlight, shining it toward the hallway to their left. A faint shadow moved across the far wall. Not walking, gliding. Did you see that? He hissed. Jade nodded slowly. It was tall, way taller than a person. The group stood frozen. Then, footsteps echoed behind them. Fast, heavy, running. They spun around, nothing, just the peeling hallway they'd come from. Then, from the direction they just looked, more footsteps. This time, slower, dragging. The sound of something pulling along the tiles. Scrape, step, scrape, step. Nick backed toward the center of the lobby. Okay, no joke, we're not alone in here. No, Mason muttered, we're not. Jade pulled out the spirit box, the handheld device that scans radio frequencies, said to help spirits communicate. She flicked it on. The device hissed with white noise, crackling through rapid-fire static. Everyone leaned in. At first, nothing. Then, cold. They watch. Can't breathe. Lena let out a small cry. This isn't worth it. I want out. I want out now. Mason turned off the box. All right, no more messing around. We find another way out. They headed back down the main hallway. The lights buzzed faintly above, some flickering, others dead. Dust hung in the air like snow. They passed the children's wing, where tiny, rusted beds still lined the walls. Toys sat abandoned on shelves. One teddy bear sat upright on a cot, its eyes missing. The whispers returned, not from behind, from ahead. And this time, it wasn't just whispers. A soft giggle echoed down the hall. Lena stopped. Did you hear that? Nope, Nick said quickly, and I don't want to. But the sound came again, clearer. A child's laugh, light, teasing. They turned the corner. No child. Just a hallway lined with broken doors. One swung slightly on its hinges. Creak, bang, open then slammed shut. Theo stepped forward, holding up his EMF reader. It spiked hard to red. This is where it's strongest, he said, right here. Suddenly, the lights above that particular door flickered on, then burst in a shower of sparks. The hallway went dark again. Jade gasped. Then from the shadows, a figure stepped out. A little girl, wearing an old hospital gown. Pale, eyes dark, hair hanging in thick clumps. She stood perfectly still at the end of the corridor, watching them. Lena screamed. When the flashlights hit her face, she was gone. Nothing remained but the empty hallway. They bolted, back through the lobby, up another stairwell, desperate to find an open window. A fire escape, anything. The building groaned around them, as if angry they were trying to leave. Mason reached a second-floor corridor with larger windows, but they were all bricked up from the inside. Who does this? Nick cried. This doesn't make sense. We're not dealing with a person, Theo said. This place is alive. From the hallway behind them, a door slammed, then another. Bang, bang, bang. The sounds came in a rhythm. Closer, faster, like someone chasing them. Then the giggling again. Closer now, around them. Lights flickered violently, casting brief shadows on the walls. One shadow wasn't theirs. It stood motionless, near the ceiling. Long arms, twisted like broken tree branches. Mason shoved open a door to their left, a nurse's lounge. They rushed inside, slamming it shut. Silence. Everyone was panting, drenched in sweat despite the cold. Jade turned on her phone's flashlight. The room was dusty, filled with overturned chairs and shattered teacups. A calendar from 1937 still hung on the wall. Then Lena pointed. Look, in the dust on the mirror. A handprint, fresh, large, pressed from inside the mirror. The hand began to slowly drag downward, leaving a streak in the dust. They all backed away. The whispering returned, now inside the room. You're not supposed to be here. She watches from above. A loud creak sounded from the ceiling above them. Then, thuds, like something walking directly over their heads. Theo looked up. We're right under room 502. Everyone went quiet. Then Lena said, "Someone just sat down." "What?" "I heard it," she whispered. "A chair. It scraped, right above us." Theo swallowed. The hanging room. Nick shook his head. "No, no way." Jade clutched her bag tightly. "We need to move." The group carefully opened the lounge door and slipped back into the hallway. The air felt heavier, pressed against their chests. They moved quickly now, not speaking, just listening to the whispers that followed them, to the echoing steps that never matched their own. Then, the singing started. A soft lullaby, off-key, slow, sung by an unseen voice. "Hush, little baby, don't say a word." They froze. The voice was coming from behind a closed door, just ahead marked morgue. "Don't," Lena whispered. But Mason stepped forward. He had to know. He reached out. As his hand touched the doorknob, the singing stopped. Instantly. No echo. Just silence. He opened the door slowly. Inside, rows of cold slabs, empty gurneys, the faint smell of something old, something long dead. Then a cry. A baby crying. From one of the cold drawers. Mason turned to run, but the door slammed shut behind them. They were locked inside. Panic exploded. Lena banged on the door. Theo kicked it. Nothing. The crying grew louder, then stopped, replaced by a woman's scream. Blood-curdling, shrieking, coming from the drawers, from every drawer. Theo pointed at the corner. There's a vent." They scrambled over fallen equipment, ripped open the loose grate, and one by one crawled inside. It was tight, filthy, filled with old spider webs and insulation. They emerged into another hallway, this one unfamiliar. Fewer windows, more broken doors, old patient rooms. Jade checked her map. "We're in the West Wing, near the surgical theater." "Great," Nick muttered. "Let's just keep getting closer to the worst parts." They walked cautiously, breathing hard, whispering now without realizing it, as if the building could hear them. And maybe it could, because the whispers never stopped. They now repeated their names, one by one. Mason, Lena, Theo, Nick, Jade, over and over, like a chant. That's when Lena stopped, her eyes wide. "What?" Mason asked. She pointed to the wall. Their names were written in blood, fresh, dripping, one under the other, and under Lena's name just 2 words. "She's next." They all turned to run again, but Jade collapsed, grabbing her ears. "I can't, the voices, they're inside my head." Theo dropped beside her. "We need to get out. Now, or we won't." The hallway was shifting. Doors were now closed that had just been open. The temperature plunged. Then, ahead, an open doorway. A faint light flickered inside. A chance. A trap. They had no choice. Mason led them inside, and the door slammed shut behind them again. Room 500, to the forbidden floor. The air inside the small room was suffocating. 5 flashlights flicked on in unison, illuminating the walls faded. Crumbling plaster with deep cracks running like veins through decades of decay. Dust hung motionless in the air, disturbed only by the trembling breath of those trapped inside. Jade sat slumped against the corner, hands shaking. Theo crouched beside her, trying to calm her. "Breathe. Just breathe. You're okay." "I heard her," Jade whispered, voice hoarse. "In my head. She's not gone." Mason turned back to the closed door they had just come through. He twisted the knob, pulled, pushed. Nothing. Like every other door in this cursed building, it was now locked. Nick paced the room. "This place doesn't want us here. It's like it's feeding off us." Lena nodded slowly. "And we're giving it exactly what it wants, fear." Theo looked up. "We need to end this. There has to be a reason it's targeting us. Why it locked us in." Mason hesitated, then pulled out the map he had printed from online forums, a hand-drawn layout of Waverly Hills. Sanatorium, marked with X's, rumors, and ghost sightings. Room 502 was circled 3 times. This room, he said, pointing. Room 502, that's where it all started. No, Lena said immediately. We were just under that room. We heard it. You saw the swinging chair. We're not going back. She's right, Nick added. There's something up there that wants us. We'd be walking into its hands. But Mason's eyes stayed locked on the map. Every story about this place always comes back to 502. The nurse who hung herself, the screaming, the shadows. It's the heart of this building. If we want to end this, you're not thinking clearly, Theo cut in. This isn't some haunted house walkthrough. Something here is real. It's playing with us. Jade looked up from the floor, her voice barely above a whisper. She said to come. Everyone turned toward her. What do you mean? The voice, Jade said. When it was in my head, she told me to come to her. She said room 502 is where I'd understand. Silence. Mason stood. Then that's where we go. Lena grabbed his arm. We won't make it out if we go up there. We won't make it out if we don't, he said firmly. She's guiding us, or warning us either way. It's our only lead. The stairwell creaked louder with every step. 5th floor. The forbidden floor. Not part of official tours, not shown on the website. Even paranormal investigators had conflicting stories about what was real and what was legend. Room 502 sat at the end of the hall, a gaping doorway of darkness. As they approached, the hallway grew colder, far colder than before. The flashlight beams grew weak, not flickering, but dimmer. Like the darkness here was alive and feeding off the light. Each step felt heavier. Then they saw it. Room 502. The door hung wide open. A long piece of frayed rope still dangled from the ceiling pipe. Mason moved forward first. The others followed slowly. The room was nearly bare. Just an old chair in the center, a broken cabinet in the corner, a rusted stand with no bag. But the feeling inside was thick. It felt like walking into grief. Lena's eyes welled up. It's like something's still crying in here. Theo held out the EMF reader. The meter spiked into the red, instantly higher than they'd ever seen. Then the door slammed shut behind them. No wind, no movement, just bang, and the lock clicked. The flashlight beams flickered again, and in the far corner something moved. A shadow. Tall, slender, head tilted at an unnatural angle. The nurse. She stepped out of the darkness slowly. Her eyes were hollow, her neck tilted where the rope had once pulled tight. The group froze, paralyzed with fear. She didn't walk, she drifted. Toward the chair. She sat, the rope above her tightened, as if unseen hands were looping it around her neck. Then her eyes snapped open, and she screamed. A sound so shrill, so full of pain, it shook the walls. Everyone dropped to their knees, hands to ears. Mason crawled forward. Wait, I think she's trying to show us something. The nurse looked directly at him now, and the room began to change. The walls morphed, no longer broken and decayed. Clean white paint, bright lights, voices. It was like they were watching a memory unfold, a vision. A nurse stood in the room, alive, breathing, young. She looked nervous, pacing, holding her stomach. Another woman entered, older, stern. You can't keep the baby, she said coldly. It'll ruin the hospital's name. The younger nurse broke into tears. I didn't do anything wrong. You violated our policy. You know what has to happen. The vision shifted. The young nurse stood on the chair, rope in hand, crying. A voice whispered from behind her, it's the only way. She stepped off. Her body swung, and the light in the room died. The group gasped as the vision ended. The room returned to its dark, broken state. The ghost was still there, still hanging. Jade whispered, they forced her. She didn't kill herself willingly, Lena added. She's trapped, Theo said. In this moment, reliving it. Then the nurse slowly turned and pointed. At the wall, a symbol began to appear in red, drawn slowly, carved into the plaster. It looked like a circle of fire with an eye in the center. The same symbol they had seen spray-painted on the lower floors. Mason stepped forward and traced the symbol with his finger. Then everything exploded. Not physically but emotionally. Every single person was flooded with sensations. Pain, panic, needles, screams, water, drowning, fire. Then, silence. They were no longer in room 502. They were standing in the hallway. Just outside the room. The door was closed. Behind them it was daylight. Bright sunlight streaming through broken windows. Lena looked at her phone. It's 8:02 a.m. They had been inside all night. Without knowing. Without sleeping. Did we dream all of that? Nick asked. Mason opened his camera. The footage was all there. The nurse, the voice, the scream, the vision, the symbol. No dream, he said. We were shown something. Something she needed us to see. They walked out in silence. The main door, once sealed, now swung open with ease. Outside, the morning birds chirped. The trees swayed gently, like the world had gone on without them. Theo turned back to the building. At the very top window, room 502, a pale figure stood watching them. She didn't wave. She didn't blink. Just watched, as if to say, "You know now." The shadow behind the curtain. The morning sun did little to warm their bones. They had made it outside. Alive. Changed. But none of them felt safe. They sat on the grass outside Waverly Hills Sanatorium, backs turned to the towering ruin. Mason reviewed the footage on his camera. Every scene from the night before had been captured: the swinging chair, the vision, the nurse's spirit reliving her death. "We have to tell someone," Lena whispered. "Tell them what?" Theo said. "That a ghost nurse from the 1920s showed us a psychic flashback. Jade looked over at the building. She showed us the truth. But what if that's not the end?" Mason slowly lowered the camera. "It's not." He tapped the map again, his voice quiet but firm. "There's another location. Here." He pointed to a section labeled Old Surgical Wing. Faint handwriting underlined it. "Do not enter, malevolent presence. Black figure sightings." Lena paled. "You want to go back in, after everything we just saw?" Mason nodded. "There's more to this. The nurse was a victim, but something worse was watching her. That black shape in the corner, did you see it during the vision?" Theo looked up. "Yeah, I thought I imagined it." "You didn't," Mason said. "It was there, and I think it's still here, hiding." Nick stood, brushing dirt off his jeans. "You wanted to go looking for that thing?" Mason didn't answer directly. He just looked up at the building again. "I think it wants us too." Later that evening, they returned. The golden light of dusk spilled through the trees as they crossed back onto the crumbling grounds. Their second entry was more cautious. No jokes, no swagger, just steady steps and darting eyes. The inside was exactly as they left it. Cold, still, watching. They moved quickly past the entrance lobby and took a different stairwell, one that hadn't collapsed. The surgical wing was located on the 3rd floor, behind a series of locked metal doors. Surprisingly, the door was unlocked. No one spoke as they pushed it open. The hallway beyond was darker, damper. The tile floor was cracked and smeared with what looked like old rust stains, though the color was too dark, too red. Jade paused. "Why are there no windows here?" Nick swept his flashlight across the hallway. "Maybe to keep things private, or to keep something in," Lena muttered. They reached the main operating theater, the door marked with a rusted, hand-painted sign. "Surgery authorized personnel only." Inside, the room opened wide, larger than expected. There were old surgical lights hanging from the ceiling, thick with cobwebs. Stainless steel tables stood in rows, some tipped over, others with brown stains impossible to identify. The far end was cordoned off by yellowed plastic curtains, sagging slightly in the center. Mason raised his camera. The room felt colder here, not like a draft, but a sudden drop in temperature, like stepping into a walk-in freezer. Lena whispered, "Do you smell that?" It hit them all at once, a sour, rotting stench, like meat left out for days. Theo covered his nose. Something died in here. Or never left, Mason added. Then Jade stopped, her flashlight fixed on the curtain. A tall, dark silhouette was standing behind it, perfectly still. Broad shoulders, long limbs, head slightly tilted, almost animal-like. Theo saw it too. Guys, everyone froze. The shadow didn't move, didn't breathe. Nick whispered, "Is someone playing with us? One of those ghost tour actors?" "No tours today," Mason whispered. "We called and checked. No one's here but us." The silence stretched. The shadow just stood there. Then it slowly shifted, like it had noticed them. It didn't step, it glided, just a few inches. Lena grabbed Mason's arm. Don't go near it." But he did. Step by slow step, Mason approached the curtain. Camera rolling, flashlight raised. The others followed, just a few feet behind. The shape didn't retreat, it waited. Mason reached out and pulled the curtain back. Nothing. The space behind the curtain was empty, just stained tile and rusted tools. But the air was different, still colder, like something had been standing there moments before. Theo's EMF reader spiked violently, red, flashing. Something was here, he said. Still is. Then Mason turned around and gasped. The shadow figure was now standing behind the others, on the other side of the room. Nick spun around and screamed. But again the figure was gone in a blink. Just a blur in the corner of the eye. A hallucination? Or something playing with them? Jade's phone buzzed suddenly, though she had no signal. The screen was filled with static. Then a whisper, just one word. "Stay." She dropped the phone in fright. Mason picked it up, staring at the screen. How? Then, a loud bang echoed through the room. The surgical lights above them swung wildly, as if someone had slammed into them. Theo backed away, voice cracking. "We need to go, now." But the main door they came through was closed. Not locked, just shut. And behind it, soft footsteps. One to then drag. A rhythm they recognized. Not human. "Something's in here with us," Lena whispered. Another curtain fluttered. Just barely, but enough to draw attention. They turned to the side and saw the figure again. But this time closer. It had no face. Just a smooth void where features should be. Its head tilted sharply to one side. Its arms were far too long, reaching almost to its knees. Its chest was moving like it was breathing, but the sound was wet and rattling. It didn't move toward them. It just watched. Then it slowly raised one hand and pointed toward the operating table in the center of the room. On that table something had appeared. A set of ancient surgical tools, blood-stained, ranged neatly. Beside them a file folder. Nick hesitated, then stepped forward and opened it. Inside photos. Old black and white photographs of patients. But these weren't treatment photos. They were experiments. Mouths sewn shut, eyes removed. Bodies marked with symbols, the same symbol they had seen in room 502. Jade looked sick. This isn't medicine. Mason scanned the names. These aren't just victims. These are sacrifices. Then the whispering started again. Louder now. Dozens of voices overlapping. Screaming, crying, chanting. It feeds. It watches. It waits. The lights above exploded one by one. Popper, popper, pop. Total darkness. Lena screamed. Theo dropped the EMF reader. It shattered on the floor. Flashlights scrambled across the room. The shadow was now in the center, reaching toward them. Its form shimmered like smoke, moving without motion, solid and not at once. Then it lunged, straight at Mason. But before it touched him, the camera light burst, and the room lit up for just a second. In that flash, the entire surgical room was full. Not just with them, but with ghosts. Dozens of translucent patients, eyes wide, mouths open in silent screams. Nurses holding rusted tools. Doctors with hollow faces. Then blackness. When the light returned, they were outside the operating room, standing in the hallway, breathing hard, shaking. The door behind them now sealed. No longer a surgical room, just a wall, as if it had never been there at all. Theo wiped his face. What just happened? Lena looked at Mason. You saw it. That wasn't the nurse's ghost. That was something else. A shadow, Mason said, and it's feeding off this place. He turned to the others. This isn't just a haunted hospital. This is a prison. And something in there, something ancient, is in control. The death tunnel. The silence after the encounter in the surgical wing was heavy, unnatural. They stood in the hallway, backs pressed against the cold brick wall where the door to the operating room had been now vanished, sealed over like it had never existed. Lena clutched Mason's sleeve. I want to leave. Now. We tried that before, Nick reminded her, his voice shaky. Remember what happened. Doors sealed. Windows vanished. This place won't let us go, Jade whispered. Theo knelt on the floor, picking up the shattered pieces of his EMF reader. This is more than just ghosts. Whatever that shadow is, it controls the building. It feeds on us. Mason unfolded the map again. One final location remained circled, the lowest point in the structure. The body chute, or as most called it, the death tunnel. A steep, concrete corridor stretching over 500 feet into the earth. Originally built to discreetly transport deceased patients away from the public eye. But stories claimed something else began using the tunnel, something that never left. I read about it online, Mason said. Some investigators went down there a few years ago. Halfway in, they all blacked out. When they woke up, their gear was gone. One guy never came out. That's comforting, Nick muttered. And we're going there. Why? Because it's the only place left, Mason said. Whatever's at the core of this place, I think it's down there. Or waiting for us to come down, Theo added grimly. No one argued. The air around them was growing heavier. The longer they stayed in one place, the more oppressive the energy became. Like the sanatorium itself was closing in. They descended through the lowest stairwell, passing sealed doors and rusted equipment abandoned in mid-use. Finally, they reached the basement level. A sign hung crooked above a cement archway. Morgue storage service tunnel. The entrance was wide, with a metal gate half bent open. A long, sloping passage stretched beyond, steep and damp, lit only by their flashlights. The floor was slick with moss and old grime. Rusted hooks and chains hung from the ceiling at irregular intervals. As they stepped inside, the air grew frigid, more than cold, wrong. Each breath left their mouths like smoke. Smells like rot, Jade said, covering her nose. Smells like death, Theo muttered. They walked in silence for several minutes, their footsteps echoing eerily. The tunnel narrowed the deeper they went, and the flashlight beams struggled to reach more than a few feet ahead. Mason looked behind them. Don't fall behind. Stay close. Lena's voice was barely audible. Why does it feel like we're not alone down here? Then they heard it. Scraping. Soft at first, like something dragging across the concrete floor far ahead. Then closer. Louder. Drag, drag, tap. Jade stopped. Is that a stretcher? The sound grew clearer. Metal wheels, uneven, rattling. The group froze. At the far end of their light, a figure appeared, pushing a gurney. A man dressed in an old-fashioned hospital attendant's uniform, cap tilted low. His movements were slow, mechanical. The gurney was covered with a white sheet. He didn't look up, didn't speak, just kept pushing the cart toward them. Back up, Mason whispered. But they couldn't move. Their legs were rooted to the ground, not from fear alone. Something was pulling them forward. A faint tug, like gravity had shifted. Like the tunnel itself wanted to drag them into its throat. Theo stumbled. Guys, I feel it too. The man pushing the gurney passed under the beam of Nick's flashlight. He had no face, just blank, pale skin stretched over his skull. The gurney hit a crack in the floor and tipped. The sheet fell away, and there Theo's body, still, eyes open. Blood streaked across his face, but Theo was standing right there. He screamed. The vision vanished in a blink. No man, no gurney, no body. But the pull grew stronger. "Something's wrong," Theo panted, backing away. Then Lena cried out. She was slipping. Her boots skidded on the damp floor, and she slid downward, as if pulled by an invisible rope. "Lena," Mason shouted, grabbing her hand. She was almost lying flat, being dragged down the slope. He pulled, straining, digging his feet into the ground. Nick rushed to help, gripping her other arm. Theo aimed his flashlight at her legs. Nothing was there, but her body was bending backward, like a force had taken hold of her spine. "Let me go," she screamed. "It's pulling me." "Hold on," Mason shouted. Suddenly a voice boomed from the tunnel walls. Low, inhuman. "She's mine." The lights in all their flashlights flickered violently. For a moment, Lena's face changed, eyes rolled back, mouth slack. Possessed. Then the lights returned, and the pull stopped. She collapsed into Mason's arms, sobbing. "I couldn't fight it," she whispered. "It was in me. Something's alive down here." They sat in stunned silence for a moment, panting in the cold dark. "Guys," Jade whispered, pointing down the tunnel, "we're not alone." Something was coming. Fast. Crawling. The sound of fingernails scraping along the walls and ceiling. They ran. Back up the slope, slipping on moss, crashing into one another. Behind them, the sound followed, not walking, not rolling, clawing. Mason turned back once, and saw it. A figure crawling upside down along the ceiling, moving like a spider. Skin gray and tight over bones. Eyes black and shining. Mouth wide open, filled with too many teeth. It screeched. The sound split the air, rattled their bones. Lena tripped. Theo grabbed her. Nick reached the gate first, yanked it open, and waved them through. They collapsed into the basement hallway just as the creature slammed into the gate behind them, teeth snapping against the bars. But it didn't follow. It just clung there, staring, as if amused. Then it whispered. "You opened the door." The group lay panting on the floor, bathed in sweat and shaking. "What did it mean?" Jade asked. "What door?" Mason looked down at his camera, still recording. He hit rewind. In the playback, the tunnel was quiet. Normal. No gurney, no man, no screeching creature. But at the point where Lena was dragged, the screen went black, and a symbol flashed, the same eye in flame. Then static. Back upstairs. They locked the basement door behind them and barricaded it with whatever they could find. They returned to the lobby. But this time, the atmosphere had shifted. The walls groaned. The shadows moved on their own, and every single window showed a different time of day. In one, midnight. In another, sunset. In a third, a full moon shining. The building was fractured now, twisting around them. Jade sat on the floor, hugging her knees. "We didn't find the heart of it in the tunnel. That was just a vein. The tunnel was used to move bodies," Theo said. "But that creature, it wasn't one of them. It wasn't human," Lena added. Mason finally spoke. "It's guarding something. The symbol, the voices, the room that disappeared. They're all connected." Nick looked up. Connected to what, exactly? Mason's voice was quiet. "To the thing that runs this place." Theo frowned. "You think the building is alive?" "No," Mason replied. "I think something is living inside it, and it's using the building like a shell, like a skin." Jade shuddered. "Then where's the heart?" Mason looked at the map one final time. At a section that had no labels, no doorways, just a single staircase that descended past the basement. A place only briefly mentioned in the old blueprints. Sublevel 6. He looked at the others. "If we want answers, we go deeper." No one wanted to say yes, but none of them said no. The screaming chair. The group gathered in the center of the shattered lobby, surrounded by broken tiles and glass, all breathing shallow. The events in the death tunnel had changed everything. No one could deny it anymore. This wasn't just a haunted hospital. It was a trap, a cage built to feed something much older than the walls themselves. Theo clutched the flashlight tighter in his hand. His knuckles were white. We keep moving or we don't leave. You all feel it, right? It's watching us. It's waiting. Mason nodded slowly, his eyes hollow. There's still one room left on the map before sublevel 6. Electroshock therapy. That's where they took the worst ones. You think it's just coincidence that all this started after we touched that chair in room 502? Jade asked. Lena hugged herself, staring at the floor. Something transferred into this building. Long ago. Maybe through them the patients, or maybe it's always been here, and they just fed it. Nick gave a dry laugh, low and bitter. So now we're the meal. No, Mason said. We're bait. But we can turn that around. They made their way slowly to the north wing, toward a hallway lined with steel doors. Some had no windows, others had thick bars welded over them. Faint etchings could be seen scratched into the paint names, tally marks, pleas for help. A single bulb flickered above the door marked, Therapy ECT Room. The door creaked open with little effort. Inside, a large metal chair sat bolted to the floor, surrounded by rusted equipment, a control panel, thick cords, glass jars with unknown residue. The straps on the armrests were cracked but still intact. In the corner sat a table with old files, charts, photographs, crude documentation of treatment. Most images showed patients mid-scream, faces distorted with pain. The smell of burnt copper and mold filled the air. Nick exhaled sharply. I don't like this room. Jade whispered, this is where they broke people. Theo circled the chair. They said they used high-voltage jolts here. Experimental levels. No anesthesia, no mercy. I heard a guy on a podcast say you can still hear screaming in here if you're quiet. Nick said nervously. Lena backed toward the wall. Let's get what we need and go. But Mason stepped forward, looking at the chair. He hesitated, then smirked, just to break the tension. Mason, don't, Jade started. But he'd already sat down. The chair groaned beneath his weight. Nick shook his head. This is a bad idea, man. Get up. Mason smiled faintly. What? It's just a chair. He placed his hands on the armrests, mockingly pretending to be strapped in. I sentence myself to the full voltage, for the crime of walking straight into hell. Not funny, Lena said sharply. Then it happened. The lights dimmed. All flashlights flickered at once, and Mason's back arched violently. His hands clenched. His head snapped back, and he screamed. A scream so raw, so unnatural, it didn't even sound human. Then he convulsed, his body jerking as if hit with real electricity. Sparks leapt from the wall near the control panel. Mason, Theo lunged forward to pull him free, but an invisible force threw him backward, sending him crashing into the metal shelf. Jade screamed. Nick grabbed Mason's arm and gasped as his own hand burned, leaving blisters where he touched the chair. Mason, Lena sobbed, get out of there. Then Mason's eyes opened, but they were not his. Completely white. No iris, no pupils. His mouth opened, and a deep, rattling voice emerged. I remember them, the teeth, the chains, the burning. Everyone backed away, frozen in horror. I was first, I was last, I am still here. Mason laughed, but it wasn't his laugh. It echoed unnaturally round the room, a sound layered with multiple voices. Male, female, child. Then the chair began to vibrate, violently, and the straps, the ones Mason hadn't fastened, now wrapped themselves around his wrists and ankles. Tightening. He shrieked again. Jade rushed to the control panel and began smashing buttons. Sparks flew, glass shattered, but nothing stopped. Nick grabbed a metal pole and jammed it under the chair, prying against the bolts. "Mason," Lena shouted, "fight it." Inside the chair, Mason's body shook violently. His voice changed again. Now it sounded like a woman's cry. "Help me, I didn't want to die." Then a child's voice. "They strapped me down, I didn't do anything wrong." Then silence. Mason's body slumped. The lights stabilized. The straps released. He collapsed onto the ground, twitching, gasping for air. Theo crawled over. "Don't move. Don't speak. Just breathe." Mason stared up at the ceiling, shaking. "I saw them," he whispered. "Saw what?" Nick asked. Mason's voice cracked. "Every patient that died here, they're still here. Screaming. Screaming in the dark. They were tortured. Electrocuted. Cut open. They can't leave. The thing in the shadows, it won't let them." Jade held his hand. "And you? Are you okay?" "No," he whispered. "I'm not sure I'm me anymore." The room grew cold again. The chair, now empty, began to rattle. Then it moved, by itself, scraping loudly as it dragged backwards, toward the corner. Everyone stood frozen. Then the control panel burst into flames. They ran. Out the door, down the hallway, into the main corridor. Behind them, the screaming started again. From inside the chair, hundreds of screams. Male, female, children, overlapping, growing louder and louder until the entire hallway shook. Then silence. They didn't stop running until they reached the central stairwell. Nick doubled over. "We can't do this. That thing is stronger now." "No," Mason said, wiping blood from his lip. "We're getting closer." "Closer to what?" Lena shouted. "To death. To truth," he said. "To the thing behind it all. It's not just feeding on the dead. It's using them, wearing them." Theo finally looked at the others. "You saw the way it used Mason. How many people came here and never left? How many others sat in that chair?" Jade spoke slowly. "Maybe room 502, the surgery theater. The death tunnel, maybe they were all rituals. Pieces of something bigger." Mason nodded. "And we just gave it more. Every time we touched something, stepped into the space, listened to the whispers, it got stronger." "Then why keep going?" Lena asked, her voice cracking. "Because if we stop now, we've already lost," Mason said. "We opened the door. Now we either seal it or it takes us." Jade pulled the map from her bag. There was only one area left. Sublevel 6, the forgotten sub-basement, marked in red ink. No staircase, no elevators, just a hand-drawn arrow and one word. Well, they sat in silence for a while. The building had gone unnaturally quiet, as if it was listening, breathing, preparing. Theo finally said it. "We finished this." They all looked to one another. Not brave, not ready, but determined. Because Waverly Hills wasn't just haunted. It was alive, and it wanted them next. Bloody handprints. The group had just escaped the electroshock therapy room, hearts pounding, minds racing with the terrible knowledge of what lurked beneath Waverly Hills Sanatorium. Mason's pale face reflected the harsh hallway lights as they moved deeper into the labyrinthine corridors, each step echoing like a heartbeat in the silence. Their destination now was the uncharted Sublevel 6, the place only hinted at in crumbling blueprints, rumored to be sealed off for decades. Yet before they even reached the stairwell leading downward, something unexpected caught their attention. A crimson smear on the wall. Jade pointed, breath hitching. "Look." They stopped. Before them, etched against the cracked, peeling paint of the corridor walls, were bloody handprints, bright red, fresh-looking, like someone had pressed their palms into the wall not moments ago. Nick stepped forward and reached out. "Don't," Lena warned sharply. He wiped the wall with his sleeve. The stain blurred, then vanished. Relieved, they continued walking. But less than a minute later, more handprints appeared lining the opposite wall this time. Clusters of them, some smeared, others perfectly defined. The bloody handprints stretched along the walls like a macabre trail. They tried wiping again. They wiped with shirts, jackets, and even bottles of water. Each time, the stains vanished only to reappear moments later. Mason's face went pale. They're following us. Jade swallowed hard. But why? What are they trying to say? Theo glanced nervously over his shoulder. This place is sending us a message, a warning. Suddenly, a distant shuffling sound echoed down the hall. Everyone froze. The red handprints glowed faintly in the flashlight beams as if pulsing with life. "Did you see that?" Lena whispered. "They moved." "No," Mason said grimly. "We're not imagining things. Something is here, watching us, making itself known." They quickened their pace, trying to ignore the growing sense of dread. But the handprints kept appearing, on the floor, on the ceiling, on the stairwell walls. It was as if the building itself was marking their path, a trail soaked in blood. They reached the rusted metal door that led to the stairwell descending to sublevel 6. Mason pulled the heavy latch. It groaned open, revealing narrow steps that plunged into blackness. Jade shone her flashlight down. The walls here were coated in a thick, slimy substance, and more handprints. This time, some appeared to be claw marks, jagged and deep. Nick shuddered. Who or what could have left these? Theo swallowed hard. People, patients, staff, or whatever was trapped here. They descended cautiously, the air growing colder and heavier with each step. Halfway down, Lena gasped. On the wall was a fresh, bloody handprint enormous at eye level. Jade reached out to touch it, and recoiled. The blood was warm. Nick's EMF reader screamed again, the loudest reading yet. Then a soft whisper floated up the stairwell. "Help me." The group turned toward the voice, but saw only darkness. Mason gripped Jade's arm. "We're close now." At the bottom, the stairwell opened into a narrow hallway barely wide enough for one person. The floor was cracked concrete, slick with moisture. The walls were lined with more red handprints, some dripping, as if freshly made. Jade felt her skin crawl. Suddenly, the walls began to bleed. Tiny droplets of dark red liquid seeped from cracks and poured down onto the floor. Lena staggered back. "This isn't just paint or residue. This is real blood." "Whose?" Theo asked quietly. No answer. Only silence, except for the echo of distant footsteps. They continued forward, moving as one. Their flashlights barely cut through the darkness. Jade paused at a small alcove where the handprints were thickest. On the wall, a single phrase was scrawled in the same red substance. "I am trapped. Free me." Nick ran his fingers over it. "That's no human handwriting." Suddenly, a chilling cold swept the corridor. The handprints began to multiply rapidly, filling the walls, crawling toward them like living creatures. Mason shouted, "We need to get out of here." But the hallway seemed to stretch endlessly. Every turn revealed more bloody palms, more desperate warnings. The air thickened, and then the walls began to close in. Slowly, crushingly, the group pressed against the walls to avoid being pinned. Lena cried out, "It's trying to trap us." Theo aimed his flashlight up the corridor. A figure appeared at the far end, tall, thin, drenched in blood, its hands pressed against the narrowing walls. Its face was twisted in agony. The creature's eyes locked onto them. It whispered, voice trembling with desperation, "Please help me." Mason stepped forward, voice steady despite his fear. "Who are you? What do you want?" The figure's form flickered, distorting like a broken hologram. "I am the forgotten, the forsaken, the ones who suffered here. We are bound to this place by pain, by cruelty." Jade swallowed hard. "How do we free you?" The specter's gaze pierced them all. "You must find the source, the heart of this torment. Only then will the bloodshed end." Suddenly, the walls exploded with 1,000 bloody handprints reaching out like claws. The group screamed and scattered. Jade tripped, hitting the floor hard. She looked up to see a handprint glowing inches from her face. It pressed against the wall. Slowly, it began to reach out, the fingers stretching toward her. Panic surged, but before the hand could grab her, Mason grabbed her wrist. "Come on." They ran back the way they came. The walls closed slower now. Finally, they burst into the stairwell, gasping for air. The bloody handprints vanished behind them. Breathless and shaking, the group pressed against the stairwell railing, trying to steady their hearts. Jade looked at Mason. "Do you believe it?" "More than ever," Mason said. "This place is a prison for souls." Nick looked down the stairwell. "But where's the source? What's trapping them?" Theo nodded. "The shadows, the symbols, the screaming chair, the death tunnel. They're all connected." Lena added, "And now, these bloody handprints." The group realized they were not just witnesses, they were part of this story now. And the building was telling them it was far from over. Mason looked back toward the corridor they had left. The walls there were silent, for now, but he knew the bloody handprints would return, because Waverly Hills Sanatorium wasn't done with them. Not yet. The nurse in white. The oppressive silence of sublevel 6 weighed heavily on them. As they caught their breath at the top of the stairwell, the bloody handprints had disappeared as mysteriously as they'd come. But the chill in the air remained colder, deeper than before. Mason wiped sweat from his brow despite the biting cold. "We've gone too far to turn back now." Jade shivered, pulling her jacket tighter. "But what is this place? A prison, a tomb, a trap?" Nick ran a trembling hand through his hair. "I don't know anymore. All I know is that it's watching us, waiting." Theo scanned the dim hallway with his flashlight. "Look, at the far end of the corridor, just beyond the flickering light, a figure emerged. She moved slowly, deliberately. A woman, clad entirely in white, a nurse's uniform from decades past. No face visible, just a soft glow, as if lit from within. Her footsteps were silent. She didn't turn, didn't speak, just glided down the hall, passing through shadows like mist. Lena gasped, "It's her." "The nurse," Mason whispered. "The one who hanged herself in room 502. The group followed, drawn by an irresistible pull. She stopped briefly in front of a sealed metal door. The door had no handle, no keyhole, just an ominous symbol scratched into the rusted surface, the same eye in flame they had seen before. The nurse raised her hand and pressed it gently against the door. The metal shuddered. The door rippled like water, and then opened silently, revealing a black void beyond. She stepped through and vanished. The door slammed shut behind her. The group stood frozen, eyes wide. "What was that?" Jade breathed. "A warning," Mason said slowly, "or an invitation." Theo edged closer and pressed his hand to the door. The metal was ice cold. A low hum vibrated beneath his fingertips. Suddenly a whisper echoed from the void. "Come in and see the truth." Nick swallowed hard. "Are we really going to do this?" Lena looked at Mason, eyes shining with determination. "We have to. If that nurse is trapped, if this is the heart of everything, we need to know." Mason nodded. One last step. They pulled out their flashlights, took a deep breath, and stepped through the doorway. They entered a vast chamber, illuminated by an unearthly pale light. The walls were lined with dozens of old patient beds, each occupied by a ghostly figure. Patients, their faces twisted in fear, pain, confusion. Among them, doctors and nurses moved silently, administering cruel treatments. Machines hissed and sparked with unseen power. The air smelled of antiseptic and decay. The nurse in white appeared again, now standing by a bed where a young woman lay, eyes closed. The nurse's hand hovered above the patient's chest, glowing softly. Suddenly, the woman's eyes snapped open. They were filled with terror. She screamed a sound that echoed beyond the walls. The nurse looked toward the group. Her eyes were deep pools of sadness. "This is where they died." Mason stepped forward. "Who did this? Why?" The nurse pointed to a large iron cage at the room's center. Inside was a shadowy figure, vast, pulsating with dark energy. Its form shifted constantly, a mass of black smoke and flickering red eyes. It feeds on suffering. It devours souls. It is the reason this place became a nightmare. Jade felt a cold hand grip her heart. The nurse continued. I was one of the first to resist. Tried to stop the horrors. They silenced me. I was trapped, just like them. The shadow within the cage stirred, its eyes locking on the visitors. The chamber trembled. Chains rattled. The nurse looked directly at Mason. You opened the door. Now you must choose. Stay trapped or fight. Suddenly, the shadow burst forth, swirling like a cyclone. The ghostly patient screamed. The chamber flooded with darkness. Mason raised his camera, capturing everything. The nurse stepped in front of them, shielding the group. Her voice rang out, clear and strong. This evil feeds on fear. Do not let it consume you. With a wave of her hand, light exploded from her palms. The shadow shrieked, recoiling. The group felt warmth flood the chamber. The evil presence began to shrink, its form dissolving into ash. One by one, the ghosts faded freed. The nurse smiled softly. Thank you. She turned to leave. The group followed her toward the doorway. As they stepped through, the heavy metal door slammed shut behind them. Back in the hallway, the oppressive atmosphere had lifted. Sunlight streamed faintly through broken windows. The bloody handprints were gone. The air was lighter, almost warm. Mason looked at the others. We freed them. Jade nodded slowly. The nurse was the key. She fought back from beyond. Theo smiled weakly. We did it. Lena took a deep breath. But at what cost? Nick shrugged. We survived. That's what matters. They looked back at the sealed door. It was quiet. Still. A final whisper drifted on the air. Rest now. All is forgiven. The group stepped outside, blinking against the daylight. Waverly Hills Sanatorium stood silent behind them. For the first time, it seemed peaceful. No exit. The sun outside Waverly Hills Sanatorium felt like a miracle. After the chaos and shadows of the inner chambers, the touch of natural light on their skin gave the group hope. The wind blew gently across the cracked stone steps. For a moment, everything seemed normal. Too normal. Jade reached for the massive double doors and pushed. Nothing. She pushed harder. Still nothing. Are they stuck? Nick asked, walking up beside her. Jade frowned. No, they're sealed. Theo stepped forward, trying to wrench the heavy brass handle. It's not locked. It's like it's fused to the frame. They all tried together, pushing, kicking, pulling, but the door didn't even creak. It was as if the building itself had decided, you stay. Mason's face turned pale. Try the windows. They split up quickly, heading to the closest windowed halls and rooms, some of which now had filtered sunlight. Theo reached the nearest hallway window and gasped. Every single one had been bricked up from the inside. Smoothly, perfectly, fresh mortar, new brick. No gaps. Not a trace of how it had been done. Nick knocked on one hard. This wasn't like this before. We looked through this window earlier. Lena ran down the hallway to the emergency exit doors, the ones they had first tried. Upon entering the building earlier in the night, she pushed against the crash bar. Nothing. She screamed and slammed her fists into it. No movement, no sound beyond the door. Just silence. I thought we ended it, she said, breathless. The nurse, the ghosts, the thing in the cage, we won. Jade appeared, shaken. But maybe the evil wasn't just in the building. Mason finished the thought for her. Maybe it is the building. They gathered in the atrium, the same place where hours ago they'd first met. The cold drafts, the flickering lights, the whispering shadows. Now, it looked different. The once cracked skylight had vanished. In its place, only blackened ceiling tiles. Like the sun had never existed. The building is shifting, Theo said. Restructuring. Every time we think we know where we are, it changes the rules. Nick sat heavily on the steps. So what now? Wait for it to eat us alive. No, Mason said quietly. We look for another way. If it closed all physical exits, there's got to be something else. Lena tilted her head. What do you mean something else? A spiritual exit, he replied. We saw the nurse, we saw the patients. Some were freed, but not all. This place is still full of pain energy. Jade nodded. Then maybe the only way out is through whatever this building is hiding at its core. Sublevel 6, Theo said grimly. No, Mason whispered. Below sublevel 6, a pause hung in the air. Nick stood. You're talking about the well. Everyone looked toward him. The drawing in the blueprints, he explained. The map we found in the office. There was a note. Remember, just one word. Well. Theo nodded slowly. It was below everything else. No stairs leading to it. No elevator. Just an arrow. Maybe that's where the source is, Mason said. The heart of the evil. And if we find it, Lena asked. We end this, Mason answered. The group set off again, deeper into the lowest levels of the sanatorium. As they walked, the air changed. It thickened, pressed in. Walls began to sweat. The smell of rot was everywhere. They moved slowly, guided only by their flickering flashlights and the feeling that something was drawing them in. Eventually, they reached an old laundry chute wide, rusted, and long abandoned. Mason dropped a glow stick into it. It fell, and fell, and fell, until it hit something liquid with a soft splash. That's it, he whispered. That's the well. There's no ladder, Jade said, peering in. Mason turned to the others. We climb. Nick blinked. You're serious? We came this far. One by one. They tied together pieces of cable and torn bed sheets scavenged from the old operating rooms, making a crude rope. Mason went first, then Theo, then Jade. Nick and Lena followed last. The descent was long. The chute narrowed the farther they went, until the walls pressed against their shoulders. Just when it felt endless, Mason's feet touched down into cold water. He cursed. The rest joined him. They stood ankle-deep in murky, black liquid inside a vast underground chamber, walls carved from stone, slick with mildew. Above them, the chute disappeared into darkness. At the center of the chamber stood a stone well, ancient and cracked, covered in strange carvings. Around it, countless old medical tools, bones, scraps of decayed uniforms. This was here before the hospital, Theo said. Way before. The sanatorium was built over this, Mason whispered. They didn't know, or maybe they did. He approached the well. A low hum emanated from within. He looked down. It was bottomless, or at least, it seemed that way. Then, a face emerged from the darkness below. Gray, hollow, eyes like coals, lips stitched shut. It stared at him unblinking. Jade screamed. Suddenly, the water rippled violently, and a massive wave of cold air rushed from the well, knocking everyone back. The lights died. Total blackness. Then laughter. Not human. Something deeper, cracked, ancient. You came willingly, it said. Now you cannot leave. Mason scrambled to his feet. We don't belong to you. But you do, the voice whispered. You stepped over the threshold. You saw. You heard. You felt. Now you are part of me. Nick shouted. We freed the souls, the nurse, the patients. You freed their pain, but left the door wide open. You are the blood now. You are the offering. Suddenly, chains erupted from the well, ghostly, spectral, snaking through the air and wrapping around the group's arms, legs, throats. Jade cried out, Mason, fight it, he screamed. But the well pulsed red light glowing from within, and the chains pulled tighter, until a new light appeared, brilliant, golden, filling the chamber like the sunrise. The nurse in white stood at the edge of the chamber, her eyes calm, her voice soft. No more. With a wave of her hand, the chains disintegrated into dust. The well screamed a sound that shook the foundation of the building. You cannot be undone, the nurse said gently. You already are. She stepped forward and placed her palm against the stone. The carvings glowed. The air shook, and the well began to collapse, screaming, imploding. A vortex opened, not sucking them in, but pushing the darkness out. All around, whispers turned to cries, cries turned to silence. Then, stillness. They woke up in the main lobby. It was morning. The sun poured through the shattered windows. Birds chirped. The doors, now slightly ajar, creaked in the breeze. Jade sat up slowly. Did we make it? Mason looked around. The walls were normal. No blood. No handprints. No whispers. They stepped outside together. The fresh air hit like a blessing. The sanatorium behind them stood tall and empty. Silent. Nick exhaled. We're free. But as they reached the edge of the property, Mason turned back one last time, and in the third-floor window, the nurse in white stood watching. She smiled, then vanished. One by one, the sun warmed their faces as the group finally stepped outside the crumbling walls of Waverly Hills Sanatorium. It was over, or so they thought. Birdsong filled the air. The overgrown path that once led them to the hospital now looked strangely peaceful. The doors behind them had creaked shut, and the building stood silent like a sleeping giant. Mason turned to the others. We survived. Jade, her eyes weary but bright, smiled faintly. We made it out. Theo wiped sweat from his forehead. I don't care what happens next. I just want to go home. Sleep for a week. They loaded up the van in silence. The air felt clearer. The heaviness that had plagued them inside Waverly Hills was finally gone. But as they drove away, no one looked back. Not even once. That was their first mistake. 2 days later, Mason sat alone in his apartment, sifting through hours of footage from their cameras. The events were still fresh in his mind, but something compelled him to relive them. It was just for documentation, he told himself. Proof, closure. At 3:12 a.m., he paused the footage. In one of the wide hallway shots, behind the flickering shadow of Theo, a face. A pale, expressionless face in the darkness, only visible for the frames. It wasn't one of theirs. Mason stared, chilled to the bone. The next morning, Jade didn't respond to any texts, or calls, or emails. At first, Mason assumed she needed time to decompress. After all, they'd survived one of the most horrifying nights of their lives. But when Theo drove to her apartment and knocked for over 10 minutes, nothing. Her car was in the driveway. Her phone was inside. But no Jade. Just gone. Disappeared without a trace. The front door locked from the inside. That evening, the remaining four met again at Mason's place. The silence was heavier than before. She wouldn't just leave, Lena said, pacing. She wouldn't. Not after everything. Maybe she saw something, Nick murmured, or took something out of the building. Theo sat quietly. What if we never really left? What if part of it followed us? Mason clicked through more video. On the last recorded file from Jade's body cam, just before they exited Waverly Hills, a voice whispered faintly through the static. You belong to me now. That night, Nick disappeared. He was last seen walking his dog. Security cameras from a street corner showed him turning onto his block, but never arriving home. His phone, found in the bushes 2 streets away. Dog, found barking at nothing, leash still attached, trembling in fear. 2 gone. 3 left. Panic set in. Lena stayed at Mason's place. Theo reinforced the doors with furniture. Every corner was lit with LED lamps. They slept in shifts, watched each other constantly. We freed those spirits, Mason said aloud that night. We saw them pass on. We sealed the well. We saw the nurse destroy the source. Or, Theo said grimly, we thought we did. Mason opened his laptop again. There was still footage he hadn't reviewed, files that appeared in the cloud sync, but weren't on the original SD cards. He clicked one. Dark screen. Faint breathing. Then Jade's voice. Why is the hallway stretching? I was just here. Where are you? The video glitched. A long, wet dragging sound. Then screaming. Then static. Lena covered her mouth. That's not possible. She left with us. Theo stared at the screen. Maybe only part of her did. At 2:47 a.m., the power in Mason's apartment died. All at once. No storm, no outage reported. Just sudden, suffocating darkness. They grabbed flashlights, all of which flickered violently. Then the screaming began. It came from outside the apartment. A long, anguished wail, bouncing between walls, stretching like a tearing sheet of fabric. Then came running footsteps, not toward them, but away, echoing down the hall. Mason and Theo rushed to the door. Nothing was there. Just darkness, and wet footprints leading toward the stairwell. Bare, small. By sunrise, Theo was gone. Lena had fallen asleep on the couch only for a few minutes, she swore. Mason had dozed off at his desk, head on a pile of printouts. They woke to find the apartment door wide open. No signs of struggle. Theo's wallet, phone, and shoes remained. Just one thing missing, Theo himself. Now only to remained. Lena broke first. I'm not staying another night, she sobbed, hands trembling. We should have burned that place down. We should have never gone. Mason didn't argue. They packed everything, laptops, footage, backups, and drove across state lines to a motel on the outskirts of Indianapolis. They used fake names, paid in cash. Mason stayed awake the entire night, watching the door. But Lena slept restlessly. When he turned to check on her at 4:30 a.m., her side of the bed was empty. Still warm. The bathroom light was on. He knocked. No response. He opened the door. Steam. No one inside. And scrawled across the mirror in dripping condensation. One more. Mason didn't leave the motel for days. He stopped calling people. Stopped replying to messages. He set up dozens of cameras in the room. Salt lines on the floor. Mirrors covered. But it didn't stop what was coming. The power would still flicker. Sometimes the footage on his laptop would replace itself with silent clips of the hospital halls, empty but familiar. Sometimes he heard the sound of chains dragging across the motel ceiling. Sometimes he'd wake up screaming, convinced he saw the nurse in white standing at the foot of the bed, only to blink and find no one there. Or worse, the imprint of feet on the carpet. Day 10. Mason found a video file on his hard drive he didn't remember recording. He clicked it open. The screen was black, then slowly light. The camera was moving, as if held by someone walking, and the hallway came into view. Waverly Hills. From inside. Not old footage, not archived clips. This was live. Mason whispered, "No." He watched as the camera turned a corner and faced a single figure. Standing in the dark, camera shaking now. It was himself. On screen, Mason stared back at the lens. Then he opened his mouth. "You should never have left." The screen went black. Mason dropped the laptop. The motel room lights dimmed. Outside the door, footsteps. Soft, slow, deliberate. Closer. Then a knock. He didn't answer. The door creaked open anyway. And standing there, in white, smiling, the nurse. Behind her, dozens of faces. Nick, Jade, Theo, Lena. All pale, all blank, all waiting. The screen on Mason's laptop lit up on its own. New file. Final entry. He sat down, trembling, and clicked play. It was him, sitting in the motel room, speaking softly into the lens. "If you're watching this, don't go to Waverly Hills. Don't chase ghosts. Don't open the door." He paused, "because it doesn't end when you leave." He stared into the camera, eyes wide, unblinking. "It follows." A whisper behind him. He turned. Cut to static. The next morning, housekeeping found the motel room empty. Bed undisturbed. No signs of a guest ever being there. Just one thing remained. A laptop. Still open. Still recording. The screen reflected an empty room, and behind the lens, a soft breath, the files they shouldn't have read. Before they vanished, before the nurse in white appeared in every reflection, and before their names were erased from official records, was one final discovery. A locked room, hidden in the east wing of Waverly Hills Sanatorium. They hadn't been marked on the blueprint Nick uncovered, not on the maps the group referenced, not in the security logs, but Mason found it, by accident, 3 days before Jade disappeared. They'd been reviewing footage in the old records wing. Dust coated everything, filing cabinets warped with rust, patient charts scattered like dried leaves, and mold creeping up the walls like veins. That's when Mason tripped over a hollow-sounding tile. He pried it up. Beneath it, a thin iron handle, and under that, hidden beneath a false floor, an ancient trapdoor. The team stared at it, breath caught. Jade whispered, "It's not on any plan." "That's exactly why we have to see," Mason replied. He opened it. The metal groaned with a sound that didn't belong in the realm of the living. The room beneath was narrow and cold, like a root cellar crossed with a tomb. Fluorescent lights flickered to life overhead, bathing the space in a sterile white glare. Dozens of steel filing cabinets lined the walls, locked tight with rusted latches. In the far corner, a single hospital bed, long unused, yellowed with age, and beside it, on a table, an open folder. As they stepped down one by one, the air seemed to thicken. A humming noise just on the edge of hearing started the moment they crossed the threshold. Theo opened the nearest cabinet. It wasn't just files. It was records, patient experiments, pages and pages of procedure, select-talk recalibrations, insulin comas, bloodletting trials, exposure therapy with hallucinogens, all undocumented, all illegal, all inhuman. Jade picked up one page, reading aloud. Patient 2219. Subject exposed to prolonged darkness. Isolation period, 93 days. Symptoms, delirium. Regression, auditory hallucinations. Final notation. Eyes no longer respond to light. Continues speaking to unseen presence named Mother White. Theo pulled another. Patient 3071. Procedure, needle injection behind ocular cavity to induce psychic unlock. Result, convulsions, partial paralysis. Notable, claimed to see rooms beneath rooms and men without skin. Subject unresponsive. Declared dead 48 hours later. Body never recovered. Lena, visibly shaken, dropped a file. "These weren't doctors," she whispered. "They were butchers." Mason, drawn to the table, lifted the open folder. His hands trembled. The file read, Patient 3982. Name, Lena Morris. Date of admission, August 3, 2023. Procedure, scheduled neurochemical fragmentation. Status, pending. He stared, then slowly turned the page. Underneath, paper clipped to the report, was a photo of Lena from just last week, her face frozen in mid-laugh, an image they'd taken while prepping for the investigation. But this was typed on official letterhead, dated 1952. Lena, Mason whispered, holding it up. She stared at it, color draining from her face. "That's not possible." Jade checked another file. Nick's name, patient 4003. Subject exhibited resistance to auditory inversion sequence. Response terminated. More files. Theo, Jade, even Mason. Their full names, birth dates, photos, and medical histories accurate to the last detail. All logged decades before they were even born. "What is this?" Theo choked out. "It's like we were already part of this," Jade whispered. "Like we were expected." The sound returned. A low, clicking whisper from the back of the room. They turned. A drawer in the far cabinet slowly creaked open on its own. Inside, a single cassette tape, labeled Subject Return, Cycle 7. Theo grabbed a player from the wall shelf, miraculously still functional, and popped the tape in. They listened. A male voice, grainy and deep. Cycle 7 now complete. Subjects unaware of timefold induction. Identity bleed achieved. Manifestation of Nurse White stable. Shadow core remains uncontained but dormant. Waverly system intact. Ray absorption of individuals anticipated within 72 hours. Process repeating. Resetting conditions. A pause. Then the voice added, "They will not remember, but we always do." Click. Silence. Jade dropped the player. We're in a loop. Theo staggered back. They've done this to people before. And again. And again. Not just people, Lena said, voice cracking. Us, over and over. They're using the building as a lab, Mason murmured. The ghosts, the voices, even the nurse known if it was random. They're conditioning us, Theo realized. Every visit, every death, every scream, it's all part of the experiment. Lena backed toward the trapdoor. We have to get out of here. Burn these files. Destroy everything. Mason hesitated, and that was the moment the door above slammed shut. The trapdoor, sealed from the outside. Lights flickered. The hum grew louder, and one by one, the filing cabinet drawers burst open. Files spilled everywhere, hundreds, thousands flipping through the air, as if blown by a wind that didn't exist. And on every page, their faces, their screams, their deaths. Again, and again, and again. Jade clutched her ears, make IT stop. But the room was alive now. Walls vibrating, whispers filling every inch of air. A new voice cut through the chaos. Soft, female, familiar. You read what you should not have read. They turned. The nurse in white stood in the center of the room, illuminated by flickering lights. Only now her white uniform was dripping with blood. Her face blurred, like it couldn't settle on one identity. One moment it was Jade, then Lena, then Mason, then something inhuman. She smiled. And now, you return. The floor split open beneath them. Not all at once, just cracks, like spiderwebs across tile. Then gaping holes, revealing writhing shadows below. The bed in the corner rattled, then collapsed inward, sucked into the void. Files flew like birds in panic. Theo grabbed Jade's hand. We have to climb. Mason ran for the trapdoor, but the metal handle burned his palm when he touched it. He screamed. Blood smeared the floor. From behind them, the nurse moved forward. Her footsteps now echoing backward, a sound impossible to describe. You saw the truth, she said, and truth is punishment. The lights went out. Darkness swallowed them, and in that pitch-black tomb of memory, all they could hear was the sound of paper tearing, as if reality itself was being unstitched. Mason opened his eyes. Morning. Clean sheets. A hospital bed. Sterile white walls. He sat up quickly. No monitors, no machines. Just a clipboard at his side. Patient 3980 for M. Carter. Date of admission, July 1951. He blinked. Jade appeared at the doorway, wearing white, clipboard in hand. She smiled. Good morning, Mason. Time for your next session. He tried to stand, but his legs didn't work. Tied down, strapped. He opened his mouth to scream, but only a whisper escaped. Let me out. Jade's eyes flickered black. She leaned close. You were out. Pause. But you read what you shouldn't have. The final broadcast. The weight of the sanatorium pressed on Mason like a living thing, crushing and relentless. Every shadow seemed to flicker with movement. Every breeze whispered secrets through the broken windows. He clutched his phone tight, lithe, only tether he had left to the outside world. It was the last thing they could do, record everything, the truth, the horror, the nightmare they had walked into. The battery was low. The screen's glow flickered as Mason switched the camera to front-facing mode. His hands shook. Jade's face appeared beside his. She smiled softly, but the tired lines around her eyes told a different story. Ready? Mason asked quietly. She nodded. Theo adjusted his coat and checked the small handheld light he carried. "Let's do this, one last time." They began walking. The hallway stretched out before them, endless, decaying, soaked in darkness. Their footsteps echoed as Mason held the camera steady, capturing every peeling wall, every rusted railing. The lens caught fleeting glimpses of something just beyond sight, a flicker of movement, a shadow darting away. "Look at this place," Mason whispered. "It's like it's alive." Theo laughed nervously. "Alive and pissed off." The camera turned to show the peeling paint of a nearby door, a handprint smeared in what looked like dried blood. Jade gasped. The camera jerked as Mason caught her reaction. They reached the old operating theater. Rusting instruments lay scattered on tables. Broken glass crunched underfoot. The camera zoomed in on the faded chart pinned to the wall. Names crossed out in red ink. Dates marked with unknown. A whispered voice echoed. "Did you hear that?" Everyone froze. The camera swung slowly, revealing the long dark corridor beyond. A faint whisper drifted toward them. "Help me." Jade stepped forward, breathing hard. "We're not alone." Mason focused on the floor. A series of footprints, wet, bloody, leading to a sealed door. They pushed against it. Locked. No handle. No keyhole. The camera zoomed in. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed behind them. They spun. No one there. Just the flicker of the camera light. Then the whispering grew louder. "You came back." Jade's face paled. The group pressed forward, deeper into the labyrinthine hospital. The temperature dropped. Their breaths became visible. The camera captured every step, every creak, every distant scream that echoed like a nightmare reaching into reality. Theo's voice trembled. "This place wants us to leave, or stay forever." Suddenly, the camera jerked violently. A pale hand shot out from the darkness and covered the lens. A breath so cold it froze the blood whispered, "Stay with us." The screen went black. Static. Silence. Still occupied. Years had passed since the last recorded transmission from Waverly Hills Sanatorium. The once feared building had fallen deeper into decay. Nature slowly claimed its territory, vines creeping through shattered windows, roots prying apart crumbling bricks. Locals whispered the sanatorium was still alive, haunted by the memories of patients long gone, and by darker things no one dared speak aloud. It was on a misty autumn morning when a new group of urban explorers arrived. Young, curious, eager to uncover the secrets buried within the legendary halls. Among them was Emma, a documentary filmmaker determined to capture the truth on camera. She carried a backpack filled with gear, flashlights, recording devices, batteries, and most importantly the lost phone. Found by chance in an estate sale years before, its screen cracked, battery long dead, but data intact. The phone had never been explained, recordings too chilling for anyone to share. Emma was about to change that. The explorers slipped inside the front doors, now warped, but still standing. Their footsteps echoed across the vast, empty spaces, thus danced in shafts of sunlight piercing through broken ceilings. Emma turned on the phone, its screen flickering to life. The last video file began to play. Mason's voice filled the room. "You came back." Static crackled. The image showed the same long hallway, peeling walls, the faint outline of a pale hand moving toward the lens. Then the screen went black. The group pressed onward, filming every corner. A soft chill settled over them. The air was thick, almost oppressive. A sudden noise startled them. Distant footsteps, faint whispers. "Did you hear that?" one asked. Emma nodded, her eyes sharp. The phone slipped from her grasp, landing with a soft thud. She bent down to pick it up, and that's when the camera caught it. Behind Emma's reflection in the cracked screen, a figure. Tall, white-clad, standing just inches behind her. Face blurred, but unmistakably the nurse in white. Emma froze. Slowly, the figure raised a pale hand. The screen on the phone flickered. A chilling whisper escaped. Still occupied, the group's bravado faded. The nurse's presence lingered, invisible to all but the camera. Emma switched the phone to video mode, capturing the ghostly apparition. The figure glided silently down the hallway, disappearing into the shadows. Behind them, the temperature dropped. Frost began to form on the window panes. Emma's breath came out in misty puffs. Suddenly, the nurse reappeared, standing just beyond the group. This time, visible to all. Her eyes hollow, her smile haunting. The explorers ran. Outside, the morning sun was beginning to rise. But inside, Waverly Hills remained a prison. For the lost, for the curious, for those who dared enter. Emma looked back once, and saw the nurse watching, waiting, still occupied. The end. Thank you for joining this journey into the shadows of Waverly Hills Sanatorium. If you enjoyed this true ghost story, please like, subscribe, and share. And remember, some doors should never be opened.